Hi everyone, it's Emily here with a video for Simon Hurley Create. In this video I'll be showing you how to dry emboss with your stencils to create dimension. If you've done this before, you'll know how fun it is. If you've never done it before, I hope this inspires you to give it a try and possibly create a new addiction. I'm going to feature 3 stencils that I thought were great for winter and holiday cards. This first one is called Sweater Weather, and it's from the newest Christmas in July release. It's become a fast favorite since you can use it as is or layer it to create a beautiful snowflake effect. The next 2 stencils are from the April Supermom release, but are fitting for winter and holiday cards too. The second stencil is the Bubble Wrap stencil, and I thought these fun, slightly wonky circles looked like snowballs and fit perfectly into the winter theme of this video. The third stencil is the Pow Stencil, and while they're intended to be cartoon explosions, they can double as giant ice crystals. Let me quickly show you what these stencils look like dry embossed on 80-pound cardstock. I was able to get this much dimension on thin cardstock, so Simon's 110-pound stark white cardstock, which I use on my cards, is going to get even more dimension. Here's a look at the Bubble Wrap stencil and the Pow stencil. I find that the Spellbinder's Platinum 6 die cutting machine gives me much better results than my previous die cutting machine. I think it's because it comes with a specific embossing mat and embossing plate. They literally make the most perfect dry embossing I've ever seen. In the past, I've struggled with various embossing mats, and they were either too thick or too thin. This one takes the guesswork out of it all. I place the platform in the machine, then I place the embossing mat on the platform. I place my Simon Hurley Create 110-pound stark white cardstock panel on that, place my stencil on top of the cardstock, making sure it's centered, then place the embossing plate on top of everything and run it through the machine. What happens in this sandwich is that the embossing plate and the platform push the stencil into the paper through to the embossing mat. Instead of cutting the paper as a die would on a hard plate, it's essentially squishing the shapes into the paper, similar to an embossing folder. I just love that I can do 2 completely different things with stencils. It really makes them more versatile. Of course, these dry embossed panels would look beautiful plain and will provide tone-on-tone dimension to your cards, but we're going to elevate them further by adding ink blending as you would normally use a stencil. Now I'm going to speed through this exact same process for the other 2 stencils. These stencils are really competing with each other for greatness. Which one do you like best? Now that all the dry embossing is done, I'm going to move to the ink blending. Now we add color with Simon Hurley Create inks to bring out the beauty of the stencils and accentuate the dry embossing. I've chosen 6 colors to work with for my 3 cards, and I've assigned 2 main colors to each card. For the Pow background, I'm stenciling with Minty Fresh and Tropical Tango. I go over the top right of each ice crystal with Minty Fresh. When the entire panel has a hint of Minty Fresh, I go over it with Tropical Tango, but on the bottom right-hand corner. When it's finished, you can see the uniqueness of each crystal, but also how much the color has brought out the dimension of the dry embossing. For the Bubble Wrap stencil, I'm using Piggyback to create a frame around the edges of the panel, so only the outside snowballs will be colored and the center will stay white, but still show the dry embossed pattern. After I'm finished with Piggyback, I add Woof, which not only added depth, but really made the pink color pop. This color combination surprised me, and I love it so much. The Sweater Weather stencil was the most difficult to dry emboss and ink blend over because I wanted to stencil in between the dry embossing. If you were to stencil exactly on the dimension, just like with the Pow and Bubble Wrap examples, then it would be more straightforward. I had to hold it up to see where the 4 diamonds from the smaller snowflakes would meet the 8 points from the larger snowflakes. Once those identifying marks meet up, it's easy. Since the Sweater Weather stencil is a layering one, a full card panel has to be done in 2 parts. This is even more obvious since I'm offsetting the designs from the dry embossed details. For this card, I'm using one of the newest colors, Midnight Snack, with Remember Me. Just like with the Pow stencil, I added the lighter ink color from the top right corner and then the darker color from the bottom right. I just love that you can never go wrong with ink blending on a stencil. Sometimes it looks like I've added too much of one color, but it always looks good when I peel back the stencil and reveal my work. Both stenciling and dry embossing alone are amazing, but when you combine them, you get that major wow factor. The stamp set that I'm using for all 3 of today's cards is Snazzy Snowman. This is a 6x9 stamp set, and these large images are perfect for A2 cards. I love the added details like the plaid scarf and extra buttons in case you want to stamp them in different colors or add them to the other snowman. All of the sentiments are fabulous too and cover a wide range of occasions for the holidays and throughout winter. I stamped the snowman in my mini Misty stamping tool, then I stamped the scarf with Remember Me and used the rock and roll technique with Midnight Snack. Since I'm using the Misty and not an acrylic block, the ink pad gets all over the lid of the Misty and I have to wipe away the ink for fear of getting it all over the image. I just love how those two blues look together on the plaid scarf. I want to replace the stamped black buttons with ones that match the scarf, so I use an acrylic block to stamp those in the same two colors. There are two styles of buttons, one with 2 holes and one with 4 holes. It's a fun little variation, and I love that Simon designed them this way. I do this instead of using the Misty because the image is so small, and it's so much quicker to use the acrylic block instead of doing them 2 at a time in the Misty. Next, I quickly watercolor the snowman using Simon Hurley Create Re-Inkers in a Tim Holtz ink palette. Then I use a standard hole punch to punch out the stamped buttons. I use glue dots to adhere the buttons to the snowman in the exact position they are stamped on him. Then I fussy cut the snowman. Isn't he the cutest? Since he blends into the sweater weather background, I'm going to saturate a tag to create a contrast and separate him from the background. Again, I'm using Remember Me, then Midnight Snack. When the tag is done, I heat emboss the sentiment, "You are so cool," in white. Then I back the tag with silver glitter cardstock for a festive element and tie a bow using white hem cord. I love working with this cord because it holds its shape, and even though it's white, it stands out amongst the other elements. I trim off the ends and adhere it to the top of the tag with a glue dot. Then I attach the snowman with large glue dots for a bit of dimension, but not too much. I still want this card to be mailable, so I didn't use foam tape. Here's the finished card. I just love this adorable snowman. He's like a marshmallow and I want to squeeze him. I love the tone-on-tone blues, and of course that dry embossed ink blended background is really amazing too. Each element on this card is noticeable but also stands out on its own. For my second card I used the 3-part snowman, and since the stamping, watercoloring, and fussy cutting are straightforward, I've skipped to the assembled image. I attached the lights to the snowman using foam tape in the middle so they pop off his belly. The ends are adhered flat on his hands, and the hat is also adhered flat on his head. The snowman is going on the bubble wrap background, and I'm stamping the sentiment that reads, "It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas," directly onto the panel. The panel is bumpy because of the dry embossing, so there are breaks in the letters where they go up and over the edges of the raised circles, but the Misty allowed me to stamp it several times to get a decent stamping. When that's done, I adhere the snowman to the panel with large glue dots, and now my second card is done. I love the soft pink on this card and the simplicity of this design. In this case, where there's not a lot of ink, the dry embossed background really stands out. And of course, when the recipient sees the card, they'll want to feel the raised circles. The stamping for my third card is a little different, so I'm going to guide you through it in detail. I'm creating a funny combination image with a little bird and the mounted snowman, so I'm going to mask in the bird. I created a mask for the bird off screen, so I can just stamp the bird and place the mask before stamping the face of the mounted snowman with the bird standing on his carrot nose. I just love the startled look on the bird's face, as if he's thinking, "What happened here?" When I placed the outline of the snowman on the bird, I noticed that the little puddles of water would show up between the bird's head and tail. I didn't want to have to deal with that, so I placed an extra piece of masking tape there so the puddles wouldn't stamp behind the bird and take away from the outline of the bird. As always, I love removing masks to reveal the images. Now I can stamp the sentiment on the panel, which I decided would be a strip of black cardstock. The big ice crystals needed a strong anchor as well as a contrast to this image. As with the second image, I watercolored it off screen using Simon Hurley Create Re-Inkers. After heat embossing the sentiment with white embossing powder, I adhered the strip to the panel along with a touch of silver glitter cardstock. Then I attached the image to the panel with foam tape. I really love the way this one turned out. Unlike the first 2 cards, I didn't really have a plan for this design. This dry embossed background was also fully ink blended, but you can definitely notice that it's not simple stenciling. It's so much more. Here's a quick review of all 3 cards. I started by creating 3 backgrounds by dry embossing with stencils. Then I added ink blending to each of the stencils in different amounts. I only used 1 stamp set to make 3 cards, but they're all very different. The Snazzy Snowman stamp set has 2 more images and 4 sentiments that I didn't use, so you can imagine all the other possibilities. These 3 cards would make a great gift set too. I hope these cards have inspired you to give dry embossing with stencils a try. They add so much dimension to your backgrounds without the bulk. If you enjoyed today's video, please click on the subscribe button and hit the bell so you don't miss the next one. Be sure to head to my blog for all the details, more photos, and a full supply list. Thanks so much for watching!